Hi, my name is Alyssa Schmidt, and today I'm going to be going over the Nazca Lines for my final presentation. Alright, so to start off, the Nazca Lines are located in Peru, South America. The little red circle represents the location of it, and it's decently far from the water. I think in class we discussed it was about 13 miles walk from the location um, to the ocean, so relatively this area is completely dry. So getting into some of this stuff, I I believe that these geoglyphs that are found, or the Nazca lines, are used as representation of the people that are buried in this. It was discovered, and we also discussed in class that this site is a cemetery. It's a mass cemetery. There's numerous bodies found, or remnants of what was there. Um, and since these people, the Nazcan people, were very into rituals, um, some of these graves would have, pots. They were headhunters, so there would be heads attached to the body. It would also, the body would be sitting upright. And so, kind of going into further thinking, there are numerous different theories about what this site is. Some of it being, in relation that um, these lines can represent irrigation and stuff like that, with water, which makes sense, but not necessarily, just for the more fact of there was no big body of water unless if you go to the ocean. And it's not saying that they didn't know what the ocean was, because some of these geoglyphs, there are representations of, sea life. So they obviously knew what the ocean was. It's just the matter of fact of the distance the ocean was from this site, and it was far. Let's put it at that. Um, Other examples are like astronomy. So these kind of represent, all these ancient civilizations are super smart. So astronomy ties is another one which I could see, um, but at the same time not necessarily. And then the most absurd one is it being like the aliens are the reason why these were drawn, and they were trying to collect um talk to extraterrestrial life, which again does not make sense. So this is why I believe that these sites were used as representation of the people buried. As you can see in a lot of the images, there are animals um, that are represented in it. And this is kind of where it ties in of the animals could be symbolic in either the group of people that were buried in the area. Um, Maybe the animals represent maybe it represents the high society of this group of people. Maybe it only represents royalty. There's numerous different examples. So like one possible example could be maybe there was a king and his nickname was the Spider King, and one of these images does have a spider on it. And let's say this king passes away, so they do the proper rituals and everything like that, and then they find an open plot, and they bury him there, and then they draw a spider to represent him because that's who he was. That was his nickname. That's what he was most well known for. And then this could also tie into maybe his son. He has a son, and he's next in line, and he takes over as king. And let's say when his time comes, he's also buried in that same plot, to show the lineage of kings from this family. Or maybe they keep on the same idea of burying family together, and since the Spider King was royalty, he had a spider geoglyph in there. Maybe they bury the rest of his family with him in that plot of land. And then you could come to think about, okay, well, what about these geometric shapes? Um, how does that tie into symbolism? Well, geometric shapes, I mean, it is kind of hard to decipher of like what that would play onto, but in all honesty, um, there are other ways to, symbolize something without a direct usage of animals or a physical thing. So, for example, some cultures, especially now, with tattoos and branding, they have different shapes and everything to represent a family or to represent the values that they have. And, it's tattooed in a specific area. So, like, you know, some Polynesian families, they have their arms tattooed with like the same exact symbols, or maybe one same symbol, and then each family has different other shapes representing stuff like that. So the geometric shapes could also represent that. So maybe it's the high life gets the animals, every other family gets a geometric shape. Geometric shapes can maybe represent those that they didn't really care for. I mean, that's kind of a stretch, but it could be a possibility. So let's say those that they actually hunted for and they just needed to dispose the body somewhere. Maybe that's where it's like, okay, these geometric shapes are that. Um, and not all geoglyphs in these Nazca lines are huge. Some of them are relatively small. So this can kind of tie into of, maybe this is where children are buried too, because again, as as a society they can thrive, but without having some of these essential resources like water, um, those who are particularly weak compared to others would die off quickly. So children could be buried in another way. There's so many different possibilities of what these geoglyphs mean, but after kind of doing research and seeing how like these people are very in tune with rituals and how they honor the dead and everything like that, I think that these geoglyphs do represent um, those that are buried, whether it be an exact representation of like the animal representing the person who they were or then their social status. um, Maybe it represents what they are in the afterlife. um, you know Anything of the sorts. But all in all, these geoglyphs, in my honest opinion, represent um, the people that are buried in this huge cemetery.